And so tonight, we're going to see the culmination of what resulted in a 2.5-year audit of Tulsa Public Schools. And then from there, we'll see what our next moves are going to be. So we opened our meeting, and the Tulsa 912 project, real quick, let me just give you a brief introduction, was started in 2009 under the inspiration of Glenn Beck. We are a nonpartisan organization, so everyone is welcome to participate with us. We have 9 values and 12 principles, 9 values. We would like, that we try and live by, and we just, like I say, we came on about the same time as the Tea Party. However, we've been able to keep it going, and like I said, since 2009, and on March 13th, it will be our 16th anniversary. So we're very focused on educating people on what's going on. And of course, Tulsa Public Schools has been a thorn in our side for many, many years. And so tonight we're going to get to see how it all ends. So we open our meetings with a prayer and pledge, and I have asked Pastor Craig Hagan to come up and lead us in a prayer. So if you would stand, because we will be following it with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Rhonda. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this fine evening. We thank you for this group that's getting here together. Father God, you said that we would know the truth, and the truth will set us free, Father. So tonight, we thank you for the truth. We thank you that we're finally going to get back down to the truth, and we thank you that you'll bless our evening together. We thank you for unity and harmony, and we thank you for everything you have done and everything you are doing, both here and around the world, and we give you the praise, honor, and the glory. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
All right, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So we're starting the meeting early. Not early. I know I said we'd start at 5. I know I see you looking at your watches going, it's not 5 o'clock, it's 10 after. But no, our meetings usually start at 6:30. But we knew that there is such a wealth of information that we felt that we needed to go ahead and get it started early to allow the auditor the time to be able to go through her presentation and then even take questions from the audience at the end if time allows. So the bathrooms are out this door and to the left. There's some bottled water in the back if anyone needs it. And I just want everybody to get comfortable because we're going to be here for a while. So first I'd like to introduce, listen, this is important to everyone. This is important to citizens, to parents, to grandparents. It's important to our state legislators about what's going on. So if you are a state legislator, if you would please stand so that we can recognize you. So we have State Senator Dana Prieto. We have Representative Mark Chapman, Representative Mark Tedford, and my state senator, Christy Gillespie. We also have representation from our delegation. So if you are with our federal delegation, if you would please stand. So in the back, we've got Sam Mulready. He's with Congressman Hearn's office. And Quentin, I don't know your last name. Gray. Quentin Gray is with Senator Langford's office, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate the fact that the senator and the congressman thought that it was important enough to have representation here as the auditor gives her results of the audit. So thank you very much, guys. We appreciate you very much. So do I have any other elected officials in here that I should recognize other than our rock star, Elena Ashley, our school board, TPS school board? So if there's nobody else, I'll move on. I do want to let you know that, we've been very vocal about what we want, and there's some people that have been more vocal than others. But when I became chairman of the Tulsa Republican Party, one of the goals that we wanted to do was to flip the school board. We weren't able to flip the school board, but we did get one member on, and that one member is Alina Ashley. And the power of one with the other, which is Dr. Janetti Marshall, who unfortunately cannot make it tonight, we were able to get the governor to request an audit. It's been years in the making, and there have been many, many people, and we owe debts of gratitude to the researchers that provided the information, to the whistleblowers that were bold enough to come forward to be able to tell their stories about what happened and to help the auditor and her team. So to that, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to all the citizens, all the legislators, anybody that had any passion whatsoever about what was going on in Tulsa Public Schools. If you spoke at the school board meeting, thank you. If you showed up just as a warm body to be support, thank you. We can't thank you enough. This is a team effort. And I think you're going to be very pleased with the results of what our team was able to accomplish. So I want to give the auditor as much time as I possibly can so that she can go through her 100 plus, I heard, PowerPoint slides and tell us what happened, and then answer our questions, because there's so many questions. But keep in mind, right after the audit was called, I bet it wasn't 6 months later, people were like, when's the audit coming out? When's the audit coming out? Well, I think you're going to find tonight that you're really glad that it didn't just take 6 months, that they dug and they researched and they questioned, and they were able to find so much that by the time you leave, you're going to be pretty mad. You'll be pretty angry. But at the same time, hopefully we have a plan forward. I did just see, I'm sorry, I want to just interrupt real quick. Josh Owens is with Senator Mullen's office, and he is here as well, so say hi to Josh. I just think it's important that the delegation, that our legislators, they're all here. We're all supporting what's going on. So Cindy, and I didn't get her bio or anything. I've known her for a number of years, but I believe she's been doing this for about 28 years. Is that right? She's been an auditor. She's just a nerd. She just happens to be cute, easy to talk to. But she has a passion for what she does. And so I would like you to join me in welcoming Oklahoma's state auditor and inspector, Cindy Byrd.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to all the groups that are represented here tonight. It's great to be able to show up as your state auditor and share some of the findings from the audit report that we just released. It was in July 2022 that Governor Stitt asked me to conduct a special audit of Tulsa Public Schools, and I know that you've all been waiting patiently for its release. Some a little bit impatiently, that these things take time. We have a small staff. They're a very dedicated and very good staff, and we will never let an audit report out unless we know it is the very best job we could do. In July of 22, when Governor Stitt asked us to conduct this audit, we didn't really get started until later that year. But I want to begin by thanking you. There are a lot of people in this room who played an important role in this process. I have used the citizens that came to us as whistleblowers as examples across the state when I talk to people about what kind of change you can make when you take a stand and you ask for an audit. Those whistleblowers throughout this process continued to give us information, and while we have a duty to keep those people confidential, they were a very important part of this audit. It was the persistence of concerned citizens and TPS parents, as well as some board members, and I want to recognize in particular the efforts of Janetti Marshall and Elena Ashley that prompted Governor Stitt to initiate this investigation. I tell people all the time we need to be more engaged in our school board meetings and elections. It's the citizens who must demand transparency and reform from their school boards. You are setting an example for the people of Oklahoma. There are many people in this room who went above and beyond to provide information and share their concerns with us. Again, thank you for your dedication. If it wasn't for your commitment to the truth and to TPS students, this audit may have never happened. Neither the state constitution nor state laws empower my office to investigate school districts on a routine basis. To conduct an audit of a school district, I have to be formally asked for a special investigative audit. So these are the divisions of the state auditor's office, and special investigative audits are usually conducted by our incredible forensic audit team. That is the team who was responsible for this audit. Only those entities listed on this slide can ask me to conduct a forensic audit. Now, I do want to point out that there is the citizens petition process where citizens could have come to me and asked for an investigative audit petition. They would have had 30 days to go out and get 10% of the registered voters of that district and turn that back in, and they would have had to have been verified, and we could have went that way. It was much simpler to get the governor to request this audit. I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the director of the forensic division and to the lead investigator. None of us would be here tonight without the blood, sweat, and yes, sometimes even tears. They put countless hours into this audit, and I am so blessed to have them on my staff. With that, we'll get into the presentation. As you all know, Tulsa Public Schools is one of Oklahoma's largest school districts, and it has an enrollment of 33,000 students, 78 different schools, and employs more than 5,000 people. The vast majority of these employees are hardworking teachers dedicated to the success of their students. This audit report is not in any way a reflection of the quality of their work. This audit is a financial review. You also know that the catalyst for this audit request was the case of Devin Fletcher. Now, I'm sure most of you are up to date on that history, but I'm going to go ahead and share it with you again anyway. Devin Fletcher was the Chief Talent Management and Equity Officer at TPS. He was one of 33 administrators brought on board to help implement Superintendent Gist's 5-year strategic plan called Destination Excellence. In 2018, Fletcher began a scheme to misappropriate funds. His activities went undetected until 2022. That's when Fletcher resigned. On July 1st of 2022, 2 prominent school board members asked the governor to initiate an audit of Tulsa Public Schools. From its inception, this scandal was politically charged. But these ladies, Janetti Marshall and Elena Ashley, had almost nothing in common politically. They had become unlikely allies in their efforts to gain clarity and understanding about TPS purchases. On July 7th, their determination paid off, and Governor Stitt asked me to conduct a forensic audit of Tulsa Public Schools. Now, these events led to some very contentious board meetings, during which 3 members refused to approve the budget, unless Superintendent Gist gave them more information. And it soon became clear the board was divided. The following summer, 2023, State Superintendent Ryan Walters drew attention to TPS's reading and math scores. He also implied that the district was in danger of losing its accreditation status. That controversy led Superintendent Gist to resign in 2023. Just a few weeks later, Devin Fletcher pled guilty to the embezzlement of over $603,000. This past November, Fletcher was sentenced to a minimum of 30 months in prison. Now, during this whole process, my job has been to stay away from the politics and get the facts straight. In order to do that, we limited our investigation to the governor's request. The governor asked my staff to investigate 3 concerns: irregularities tied to vendor contracts and potential mishandling of public funds, questions regarding the district's use of elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, that's the ESSER funds, and possible violations of House Bill 1775 and the associated administrative rules. Now, we structured our investigation according to the governor's concerns, focusing broadly on TPS's compliance with Oklahoma statutes, rules, and policies. We also conducted a thorough review of the district's internal purchasing controls. Now, I want to be very clear, this was an audit of a small group of TPS administrators. Our investigation was not focused on teachers' conduct, curriculum, or behavioral standards applied in Tulsa classrooms. As state auditor, I focused on expenditures, internal controls, and oversight of those expenditures, specifically administrative compliance with state law and district policy. As we began to test samples of TPS purchases, it soon became clear that Fletcher's misconduct was the result of a much larger problem. Worried about the possibility of additional malfeasance, we had no choice but to expand our test work sample. The more violations of statute and policy we found, the larger the sample became. Our team reviewed more than 1,400 financial discrepancies. So before I explain our findings, I want to emphasize 2 key points. First, even before Fletcher began his activities in 2018, multiple district administrators created and fostered a culture of financial noncompliance. Certain district leaders routinely disregarded laws and policies designed to protect taxpayer money. We discovered that TPS consistently failed to properly verify and document the receipt of vendor services. A systemic lack of internal controls existed at TPS, which enabled mismanagement and potentially placed millions of additional tax dollars in jeopardy. Second, noncompliance flourished due to the administration's lack of transparency with the Board of Education and the public. Ultimately, the board shares responsibility for financial management of the district. However, Superintendent Gift's team took measures to hide information, including evidence about unauthorized expenditures from the board members. At times, TPS administrators found ways to cut the school board out of the purchasing process entirely. Now, had board members acted with more diligence, exercising their fiduciary responsibilities to taxpayers, they would have been in a much better position to prevent Fletcher's malfeasance and to provide the oversight that the state law requires. The audit's findings can be organized into 12 overarching categories, which you can see on the screen. Any dollar wasted in education is cheating a child out of needed resources. And we have to find a way to ensure that the money we allocate to schools get to the teachers and the students who need it. I'm going to spend the rest of our time showing you the documentation backing up our findings. Oklahomans have the right to expect public school leaders to be trustworthy stewards of their children and their taxpayer money. So let's begin with expenditures. The State Auditor's Office conducted a thorough review of $37.7 million in expenditures, which span from school year 2015 to school year 2023. Of that amount, $29 million was paid to consultants. We examined 900 invoices received from 90 vendors, and we found over 1,400 financial discrepancies. We found compliance violations at every step in the procurement and purchasing process. We will begin with the vendor selection. Oklahoma law mandates that the Board of Education prescribe and administer business procedures and controls for district purchases. In compliance with this law, Tulsa School Board created Policy 5202, which requires the district to issue a request for proposal or an RFP for any purchase greater than $50,000. The policy also requires the school board to consider at least 3 bids from competing vendors before offering a contract. This policy holds school districts accountable for large purchases. Now, of the $37 million we tested, $25 million was spent in violation of the district's RFP and competitive bidding policy. For example, TPS vendor, the Achievement Network, received more than $782,000 from TPS without submitting a bid. TPS disregarded the RFP requirement because the expenditure was later reimbursed with donor funds via the Foundation for Tulsa Schools. So the Foundation for Tulsa Schools is a nonprofit entity created for the purpose of supporting the operations of Tulsa Public Schools. TPS administrators routinely use the foundation to reimburse expenditures for vendors circumventing competitive bidding. TPS initially paid the Achievement Network with taxpayer dollars. Now, even if the expenditure is subject to donor reimbursement, the board's policy must be followed. Another concerning issue discovered by our auditors involved 19 vendors that received payments just below the $50,000 RFP threshold. So here are just a few of those purchase orders. Now, in our experience, when a government entity issues repeated payments within a few $100s of the threshold, it gives the appearance of an intentional attempt to bypass policy and undermine board oversight. We also found problems with the encumbering of purchase orders. Encumbering just means that's the setting aside of funds for a designated purpose. Oklahoma law requires that every district payment be preceded by a matching purchase order approved by the board. And when followed, this step in the procurement process ensures that the board has a chance to review the budgeted expenses before TPS issues any checks. Yet we found multiple examples of unencumbered funds and improper use of change orders totaling more than $860,000. For instance, an interior design consultant working for the TPS bond department received more than $421,000. Now, because the proper change order process was not followed, TPS paid this vendor an additional $243,000 without full transparency to the board. In another example, we found that TPS administrators changed the board-approved purchase order into a blanket PO. This allowed the vendor, Turnaround for Children, to submit additional invoices without waiting for board approval. In another example, TPS backdated financial records, including purchase orders, as well as change orders to allow payments to a vendor owned by a former TPS employee. We found similar violations of state law with additional vendors. Now, keep in mind, there was a system in place to notify TPS employees of irregularities between payments and purchase orders. As you can see, they must acknowledge that these payments appear to be a violation of state law. And it is evident that top administrators understood that these payments were not allowable. This brings us to the final steps of the procurement process: invoicing and payment. Oklahoma law states that no payments can be made without an itemized invoice, as well as proof of receipt of goods or services. And TPS's disregard for this statute was perhaps the most pervasive issue uncovered during our investigation. If administrators had demanded itemized invoices, it would have been more difficult for Fletcher to perpetrate his scheme against the district. Of the 900 invoices we examined, more than 300 of them lacked proper itemization. Altogether, we found that TPS made more than 700 payments to vendors without ever receiving the documentation needed to prove receipt of services. We also found that many TPS vendors issued invoices based on budgets outlined in their contracts, not actual cost. Let's look at some examples which will illustrate the issues that budget-based invoices pose to taxpayer dollars. This image is taken from a TPS contract with a vendor. The invoices were not based on the actual services rendered. Now, instead of describing the services or the vendor's work product, the invoices simply refer to the contract agreement as the justification for the amount billed. It is impossible for taxpayers to know what services were actually provided month to month. We simply can't determine whether the vendor fulfilled its obligations to the district. Another vendor also submitted budget-based invoices. $520,000 was budgeted for redesigning the school improvement planning process. This contract provides no information. There is no description of services and no proof of work product. Once again, the vendor simply relies upon the contract's budget to justify the amount billed. This is an inadequate description of the vendor's scope of work or intended work product. It's difficult to hold vendors accountable when contract language is vague. Now, unfortunately, this contract is not unique. Part of the problem is that many contracts were not properly reviewed. If we look at ERS's invoices, we find the same lack of detail. Another vendor, who I mentioned above, was hired without following the RFP process. Their invoices were also budget-based and lacked the required supporting documentation for the amount billed. The same can be said for the vendor, West Ed, who received a total of $1.6 million. Another vendor, the New Teacher Project, was paid more than $8 million by TPS without supporting documentation for their invoices. Another vendor, the Leadership Consultancy, was also paid without itemized invoices. In fact, our auditors could not determine if any employees at TPS actually received services from the vendor. To satisfy our auditors' request for evidence validating the hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments made to the vendor, the TPS Communications Director reached out to the Leadership Consultancy asking for documentation of past work. In response, the company's CEO provided a presentation explaining she had received over $848,000 to provide professional coaching to 79 district employees. That means she was paid $10,740 per employee. Now, it is concerning that $848,000 could be paid to a vendor without any documentation of services on file and reviewed by the district. TPS also advanced lump sum payments to certain vendors, including the consulting firm Turnaround for Children. In this vendor's contract, the district agreed to pay 50% up front, that is, within 30 days of the contract's date. Similarly, Columbia University's Center for Public Research and Leadership received $25,000 in upfront payments. Likewise, Candor Consulting received payments before it had rendered the services described on its invoices. Now, we also believe that Devin Fletcher altered or issued fake invoices similar to those used in his scheme. For instance, a summer intern was hired in 2021. He was paid $13,000 for 5 weeks of employment. It's around 30 work days. He was also provided housing, which cost $2,100, and that was covered by the foundation. So let's put that into perspective. In 2021, starting salaries for certified teachers began at $40,000 a year. So an intern was making nearly a third of a new teacher's annual salary in less than 1 month. Now, to make this worse, we're not sure exactly what this intern was doing or why he was hired. There is no evidence that the intern's work was needed or even utilized by the district. Furthermore, the intern's invoice was in the same format as the fake invoices associated with Fletcher's scheme. Now, the same is true for a $20,000 invoice for a former TPS employee. There's no evidence that she provided any meaningful work to the district. Ultimately, The systemic lack of internal controls at TPS opened the door for misappropriation of funds. Fletcher pled guilty to wire fraud in October of 2023, totaling $603,000. Our audit discovered an additional amount of $221,503 of misappropriated funds. That total included $494,503 from TPS and another $303,000 from the foundation. The district's initial concerns were centered on one vendor, but we discovered that Fletcher had engaged in wrongful activities with at least 5 consultants. Snickelbox was a company owned by one of Fletcher's acquaintances, hired as a consultant by Fletcher. They attended a fellowship class at the Byrd Center, a nonprofit operating out of the Yale School of Management. Now, through TPS and the foundation, Snickelbox was paid over $870,000, with $329,000 of that being misappropriated. Like many of the vendors we previously described, Snickelbox's invoices were not itemized, and its consulting agreement lacked sufficient detail about the work product it was expected to deliver. The vague nature of Snickelbox's invoices, statements of work, and contracts enabled Fletcher to manipulate them without detection. Snickelbox was placed on a monthly retainer, and its annual contract amounts grew steadily from $30,000 in 2018 to $300,000 in 2022. Fletcher was able to fraudulently inflate the amounts billed by Snickelbox, creating false invoices. At least 4 other TPS administrators approved these invoices or payments. Fletcher used these misappropriated funds to reward TPS employees, mostly members of his own talent management department. He dispersed $4,000 in gift cards to 22 employees. Similarly, Snickelbox directly paid $42,000 to 5 TPS employees. Now, these gifts are not allowed under TPS policy 4409. Fletcher also fabricated invoices for his half-sister, Shaniqua Monet Kemp, whom he hired under the pretense of providing consulting services. Kemp received $448,125. We found no evidence that she rendered services to the district. Kemp received more than $143,000 before anyone questioned her invoices. It wasn't until Kemp submitted a proposal for $200,000 in school year 2020 that one employee spoke up and brought up the RFP and bidding requirements. These red flags were disregarded by the then deputy CFO, who waived the competition requirements and approved the payments to Kemp. Fletcher also falsified invoices for KAG Capital, who received $21,000 in payments. Like Ms. Kemp, there's no evidence that KAG rendered services to the district. We reported these transactions to the proper authorities, and KAG has since repaid the full amount to the district. Isaac Domingue was also an acquaintance of Fletcher and was hired to analyze employee data relevant to the COVID-19 vaccine. Domingue was to track which TPS employees were, and more to the point, were not likely to get a COVID vaccine. Now, you may remember TPS eventually ended up offering incentives to staff who took the vaccine. There is no evidence that Domingue produced any work for the $41,400 that he received from TPS. Fletcher altered Domingue's invoices, inflating the amount due, leading to $17,100 in questionable payments. Fletcher also submitted false invoices for another former coworker who was associate of Fletcher's at his previous employer, Denver Public Schools. Now, this vendor submitted an invoice for 3 hours of consulting work to TPS. Fletcher added 100 hours to the invoice, resulting in an overpayment of $9,000. Many of Fletcher's activities were perpetrated against the foundation, the nonprofit that was dedicated to the TPS students. TPS employees, including Fletcher, often leveraged the foundation to limit transparency with the board and the public. The foundation's purchases are limited by statute to the operations of the school district. Now, most of the nonprofit's purchases were issued as reimbursements to TPS. These reimbursements totaled $57.2 million from 2015 to 2023. However, when the district needed to make certain purchases where public funds could not be used, they often asked the foundation to pay those costs directly. TPS administrators refer to this method as direct pay, and direct payments accounted for $5.1 million of foundation expenditures from 2015 to 2023. The foundation acknowledged later that direct payments were an issue after Fletcher's activities came to light. Their new director acknowledged that the foundation oftentimes serves as a loophole for TPS to avoid having to go to the Board of Education for approval. Some problematic expenditures were handled as direct payments. For instance, the foundation paid for the services of a consultant after the district realized it had failed to encumber funds as the law requires. Additionally, direct pay was used to distribute bonus payments to TPS employees for moving, retention, and supplemental income. These payments, totaling $504,000, were not processed through district payroll, nor were they included in the employees' contracts. Oklahoma law requires that all compensation for school employees be clearly defined in their contracts to ensure transparency. The former chief financial officer, Jorge Robles, denied any knowledge of these bonuses, even though he had received a $25,000 bonus when he joined the district. 3 administrators also signed bonus retention agreements, confirming that the checks were linked to their terms of employment, but not included in their contracts. Now, I want to pause with this image. Paula Shannon, who was the deputy superintendent, received $35,000 in bonus payments. Once again, that's close to an entire year's pay for new teachers. Furthermore, almost all of the recipients of bonuses were already making 6 figures. Meanwhile, you have teachers who take a second job to make ends meet. Of these bonus recipients, at least 65% did not stay with the district for more than 5 years. 16 of the bonus checks, or 2/3, totaling $221,000, were distributed to the alumni of the Byrd Center at Yale School of Management in Connecticut. Only one of these Byrd alumni remains with the district today. One of TPS's greatest challenges under Superintendent Gist was teacher retention, a problem exacerbated by a statewide teacher shortage. The TPS was hit particularly hard by the state's teacher shortage. In 2016 and 2017, the first 2 years of Superintendent Gist's leadership, teacher turnover jumped from 13.5% to 21%. Gist linked rising turnover to low morale, which she blamed on inadequate salaries. But it's not obvious that pay was the main source of high teacher turnover in Tulsa. The Tulsa World quoted teachers who cited top-down directives from district administration as a reason for leaving. Others felt that admin did not properly support their disciplinary measures. Superintendent Gist, however, was firm. She said the main problem was low morale tied to teacher salaries. In fact, she joined the 2018 teacher walkout. Now, I agree with Dr. Gist that we need to support our teachers, but I question her decision to spend $29 million on consultants, or $500,000 on administrative bonuses, or even $13,000 on a summer intern. That is money that did not end up in Tulsa classrooms. Whatever the combination of reasons for high teacher turnover in Tulsa, Dr. Gist did develop a program to address it. It was called the Tulsa Teacher Corps, or TTC. The Teacher Corps was a new teacher recruitment training initiative tied to Superintendent Gist's 5-year strategic plan, Destination Excellence. TTC proposed a new pathway to teacher certification. The first group of trainees began a 6-week training program in the summer of 2018. Training included 5 to 10 hours a week of practice teaching in summer school classrooms. Participants in the Teacher Corps were expected to fill full-time teaching positions by the end of the summer. They continued to attend training sessions throughout the year while teaching under temporary, emergency certificates, and pursuing full certification. Now, eventually, in January of 2020, the Oklahoma legislature approved this alternative certification program. However, for 2 years, the Teacher Corps operated without proper authorization. Some participants taught summer school without certifications, some without required OSBI background checks, and some without district contracts. In other words, many did not meet the basic requirements for classroom instruction. The board was not involved in paying these uncertified teachers for 3 out of the 4 years of the program's operation. Rather, TPS utilized vendors to pay the new teachers' summer stipends. Initially, the New Teacher Project, which ran the Teacher Corps trainings, paid for the Corps members' stipends. The vendor was then reimbursed by the foundation via direct pay. This allowed district leaders to keep board members in the dark about payments to program participants. In fact, one TPS employee celebrated the fact that they would not need to seek board approval for the Teacher Corps stipends. In 2019, the New Teacher Project elected to not cover the stipends, so the district paid the recruits as vendors directly. TPS also overpaid the trainees $35,000 that summer. In 2020 and 2021, Snickelbox facilitated the stipends, making upfront payments and being reimbursed by the foundation. Many of this vendors' invoices were false and are linked to the Tulsa Teacher Corps. Now, given the nature of these transactions, the Corps program became a vehicle for Devin Fletcher's largest misappropriations. Community partners are nonprofit organizations that provide supplemental services for TPS students. Members of these organizations interacted with students from at least 10 school sites, and altogether, TPS spent more than $37 million for community partner initiatives. One community partner, Growing Together, received $1.2 million between school year 2020 and school year 2023. Growing Together did not itemize their invoices. Instead, invoices were based on budgeted cost rather than actual cost. And when we asked for documentation of the services delivered, Deputy Superintendent Paula Shannon replied that TPS did not have access to the rich sets of reports and data generated by Growing Together and its partner organization, Communities in Schools, or CIS Mid-America. In some cases, they handed out direct aid, including food, utility payments, even cash to families. Now, in other words, TPS provided state and federal funds to Growing Together TPS provided state and federal funds to Growing Together and CIS, and then allowed them to turn around and pay certain families directly. TPS could not provide evidence that its administrators, principals, or other staff provided oversight of these distributions. Nor could TPS provide evidence of the criteria utilized to determine eligibility for the cash distributions. Growing Together received more than $108,000 for services that was not part of their contract. Specifically, Growing Together partnered with Tulsa Latino Community Development to conduct district outreach among Latino families. These outreach services were billed at a rate that varied from $20 to more than $106 per hour. Training, technology, and administrative fees were also attached to those invoices, though there was no supporting documentation to justify these expenditures. More than $42,000, or 40% of the amount billed for student outreach, went to administrative fees. Another community partner was the Opportunity Project. This organization was created to serve as a liaison between TPS and outside entities like the Girl Scouts or the YMCA. From school year 2020 to school year 2023, TPS paid the Opportunity Project more than $6 million. The Wallace Foundation provided another $2 million, and the foundation paid $65,000. The Opportunity Project did not contract with any other school districts. It was completely funded by the work it did on behalf of TPS, and taxpayer dollars were the primary source of the revenue for this organization. The Opportunity Project's administrative fees accounted for more than 30% of what the organization received. Deputy CFO Jill Hendricks admitted that the organization's invoices from March to May of 2022 had been paid without any review. She asked a staffer to examine and approve the spring invoices in July of that year, months after they had been billed. Hendricks also told the Opportunity Project that TPS did not require the submission of supporting documentation. Opportunity Project's invoices were vague and allowed the nonprofit to overbill TPS by more than $96,000. One of the Opportunity Project's partnered vendors operated an after-school bike club. In school year 2022, the company donated $30,000 to fund stipends for teachers chaperoning the project. The vendor then billed the Opportunity Project for nearly half of their donation. The Opportunity Project then billed this amount to TPS. Since the district did not ask for any documentation to support invoices, staff did not realize they were paying back money supposedly donated to TPS. Now, ultimately, TPS submitted the Opportunity Project expenditures to the State Department of Education for reimbursement through the federal ESSER program, a federal COVID relief program. TPS received a total of $83 million in ESSER funding for school year 2020 to school year 2023. And we found that TPS did utilize the federal funds in compliance with the stated purposes of the grants. However, the district's systemic lack of internal controls brought some of this federal grant money into question. TPS was improperly reimbursed $110,801 in ESSER funds by the State Department of Education for costs associated with the Opportunity Project. The invoices TPS submitted for reimbursement through ESSER did not detail the services rendered, resulting in questioned costs totaling $4.9 million. Now, beyond the purchasing issues that we've covered in length, my team found additional compliance issues with some district vendors. Board policies 4490 and 4409-T restrict TPS employees from accepting or participating in travel paid for or provided by the district vendors. We discovered that TPS, after purchasing $32.4 million of computer equipment from a vendor, received training credits of $227,020. These training credits were paid directly to TPS employees by the vendor for travel and related expenses. This appears to be a direct violation of district policies. In addition, of the $227,000, $165,977 remains unaccounted for. The topic of vendor-paid travel brings us to another issue at TPS, conflicts of interest. Former board member Hania Rivera-Wester, then Managing Director of Communities and Schools of Mid-America, voted to approve a $390,000 contract for Growing Together, which was partnered with her employer, CIS. Rivera-Wester failed to disclose that her husband was the founder and executive director of Growing Together. This was a violation of Board Policy 1102. Now, thankfully, some concerned Tulsa parents and citizens brought this issue to light early on. And once again, I'm so grateful for your attention to education issues in Tulsa. Another board policy, 4409, forbids a district employee from holding outside business interests that may interfere with their loyalty to TPS. Advanced approval for any outside employment is a district requirement. Two district employees, both executive administrators, operated businesses outside of their TPS employment. Assistant Superintendent Paula Shannon registered a business, Whole Leader Lab, LLC, toward the end of 2022. There is no evidence she obtained the required approval from district legal counsel. Furthermore, her website reflected an endorsement by a TPS vendor, bringing into question Shannon's impartiality. Now, we discovered that TPS's executive director of bond and energy management owned an architectural consulting business during the last 10 years of his employment at the district. He was conducting personal business with his TPS email account, and communications suggest that he was using district time, office space, and electronic resources for his own personal profit. We also found that Hudgens Company conducted business with a school vendor, an engineering firm. From 2015 to 2024, the engineering firm received more than $8.4 million from the district, $1.6 million of which was reimbursed to the district through federal ESSER funds. The bond director was one of 3 people tasked with awarding construction bids, including those granted to the engineering firm. In fact, as a committee member, the director helped rank the firm's bid that was ultimately awarded to them by the district. He also managed the budgets for the district's bonds projects. The extent of the bond director's personal business with the firm is unknown, but in 2019, he received $319,024 from the engineering company. This was higher than his TPS salary, which was approximately $120,000. Furthermore, the bond director's largest architectural projects in recent years were all at TPS locations. These actions are a violation of district policy and may also constitute a violation of state law. Now, it's our understanding that the bond director resigned last week 2 weeks ago, after we shared our summary of findings with TPS. And this issue has been reported to the proper authorities. Public schools are government schools, and transparency is a key element of good government. TPS failed to maintain control over records. The district relied on third-party applications like Slack, Trello, and Google Docs, which could be potential violations of the Open Records Act. In some cases, the district lost access to its own records. When our investigator requested access to staff communications sent through Slack, TPS had to request copies from Slack. The requested messages have never been produced or delivered to us. To give you an idea of the volume of records inaccessible to TPS, Jill Hendricks, the TPS CFO, instructed her team to use Slack for all internal communication. Now, Slack was commonly used by a core group of decision makers at TPS. These administrators, who referred to themselves as the super team, communicated via their own Slack channel. Now, this is an image of Devin Fletcher's Slack profile, indicating notifications from Superintendent Team TPS. We also found documents on the Google Drive identified as confidential and labeled as not intended for public distribution. One of these documents discussed $14 million in planned expenditures. We recommended a thorough review of TPS's record-keeping practices to ensure that no financial documents are mislabeled confidential. Obtaining access to records in a timely manner was also a major challenge for our auditors. Because the documents were not readily available, TPS emails became a necessary element of our investigation, helping us track vendor relationship and payments. Whenever we requested emails, they were withheld until they had been thoroughly reviewed and heavily redacted. There are also large gaps within email communications we received for key administrators. And these gaps are linked to the summer and fall of 2021. The timing is significant because, according to TPS, district leaders began planning for Fletcher's departure in December of 2021. Our investigation also revealed issues regarding the Oklahoma teachers' retirement system. For years, TPS failed to make required contributions on behalf of eligible employees to the retirement system. And while the district's outstanding liability has not been fully determined at this time, TPS currently owes $1.2 million. And per the retirement system, there is a large pending liability for TPS that will definitely exceed the $1.2 million. Now to DEI expenditures. For school year 2023, the State Department of Education required all school districts to submit a report of DEI-related purchases. We found that TPS underreported the amount paid for DEI-related services and consultants by at least $1.7 million. However, since invoices and any other supporting documentation were vague, the full amount expended for DEI in 2023 could not be determined. For the 8 years of expenditures our audit covered, we discovered that TPS hired at least 69 consultants, spending more than $35 million to research, plan, recruit, train, and coach staff as the district implemented its 5-year plan, Destination Excellence. Destination Excellence was built on 5 key values, and equity was the leading core value and the priority. In 2021, Superintendent Gist said, "We deliberately put equity first. It is our primary core value and the foundation of all of our decisions." Yet in school year 2023, TPS failed to report expenditures for several of these DEI-related vendors. Turnaround for Children received $40,000 in 2023. The New Teacher Project, which led the Teacher Corps program, received $123,101 that year. Growing Together was paid more than $526,000 in 2023. And CT3 EduService made over $1 million in 2023 alone. These expenses were not reported to the State Department of Education. We also noted during our investigation that TPS worked with an organization called Impact Tulsa as a community partner to conduct significant data work in the development of a Child Equity Index. This index was designed to assist the district with allocating resources to targeted schools based on a number of factors. Among the factors utilized in the index's development were race, ethnicity, gender, neighborhood crime statistics, student mobility, and other factors. Impact Tulsa at the time was a nonprofit component of Tulsa Community Foundation. In their own words, Impact Tulsa is a data repository, research institution, and collective backbone. Impact Tulsa was paid through the foundation for their assistance with the index. Now, we don't know exactly how or when the index was utilized by TPS, but we know that the concept was presented to administrators at TPS in 2018, and that Impact Tulsa, quote, served all students in Tulsa County, helping them understand their data and strategically think through population-level interventions. This image, student-level domains, shows some of the factors that were used to determine how TPS might reallocate resources in line with its equity goals. The stated purpose of gathering this data was to understand what factors outside of school explain differences in student outcomes. TPS took the student data and created neighborhood maps as well as school-specific maps to help administrators decide which areas of Tulsa might need additional resources. Now, given that the state of Oklahoma already has a complex funding formula for distributing educational resources, this certainly warrants further investigation and discussion. Now, going back to Governor Stitt's request, one of his concerns centered around possible violation of House Bill 1775, which bans certain elements of critical race theory, or CRT. The law pertains to what can be taught in classrooms. But the Oklahoma Administrative Code extends those restrictions to the schools and their activities more broadly. The administrative rules prohibit schools from adopting DEI plans that incorporate concepts of CRT. My focus was a financial review, and it was not to comment on TPS's teaching philosophy or ideological principles. Our investigation did not look into curriculum or disciplinary methods. My job was to analyze district expenditures and to look for potential violations of state law related to spending. When House Bill 1775 became effective, the district represented that they did not need to change their lessons and/or approach in regards to CRT. Our investigators reviewed historical documents, training materials, contracts, presentations, invoices, and other records provided by TPS. The district's failure to keep adequate documentation to support their expenditures affected our ability to determine the exact services provided, courses offered, or presentations made. However, there was evidence that the district did incur some expenditures with vendors for prohibited concepts after House Bill 1775 became effective. No auditor wants to find evidence like this. It doesn't serve anybody's interest when a public school fails to act with financial responsibility, especially the interest of the wonderful teachers and students of this school district. Now, even though we uncovered substantial issues with internal controls and noncompliance with state law, and the scope of our investigation was limited, we're still left with a number of unanswered questions. Why were there substantial gaps in communications and emails between administrators, including between Superintendent Gist and Fletcher, that were never provided to our investigators? Was TPS correctly coding the numerous consultants and vendors in the Oklahoma cost accounting system as administrative cost? And we are recommending that officials at the State Department of Education pursue the answer to that question. And finally, is TPS still involved with vendors, training, practices, and concepts intertwined with the elements of CRT that potentially violate House Bill 1775 and the administrative rules? Because this was not the primary focus of our audit, we were unable to make this determination. All of these questions merit further investigation by the appropriate agencies, and we're turning this over to the Attorney General. We're a reporting agency. We don't do anything beyond report. It's now up to the Attorney General to see if he takes any action on this report. There is reason for hope. Our findings identified key areas where reform is necessary and can be implemented immediately. We are hopeful that the current administration has already taken some steps to address the issues that we've discussed here today. The administration needs to actively work to improve internal controls and strengthen oversight and transparency. These efforts would demonstrate a genuine commitment to resolve the systemic issues that we uncovered at TPS. For my part, I extend an open hand to Superintendent Dr. Ebony Johnson and the Tulsa board members. I'm committed to helping them reestablish sound financial practices that will protect our students as well as the taxpayers. Moving forward, there's no reason why TPS can't rebuild and foster a culture of responsibility and trust, and it's my sincere hope that they begin to do so immediately. Thank you.
Just briefly, before we get into questions, Elena, is there anything that you would like to come up and say? Or, I mean, we owe you a huge debt of gratitude, so is there anything you would like to come up and say?
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Auditor Cindy Byrd.
And the team.
And the team. Oh my goodness, the investigating auditor, I got to meet with her and she was incredible. And I loved the way she stood her ground when she was getting pushed back in our meetings. So that was really wonderful. I want to thank all of you for being here. And I want you to know that I completely understand that this isn't an Elena Ashley thing where, you know, I was one of the two people who was brave enough to talk, to reach out to the governor. But a lot of hard work went into it. The GOP office, they encouraged me. We had several people, parent groups. I think there was a parent group led by Melissa Remington and the Moms for Liberty, and all of these people definitely had a hand in bringing forth this information. And like you said, the whistleblowers. I just couldn't send emails fast enough initially to the auditors to say, well, this person has information or that one. So people send in information and we would try to forward it, and we appreciate it. And we do thank you for saying as well that this is just the beginning. There's a lot of work to be done. And I'm on board for helping do it, whatever we can do. But it is so important. It's so important. It's so important to have transparency in these agendas that we're reading. It is so good to know that I wasn't just losing it when I was saying, I'm not getting enough information here. We're not getting itemized information. We don't know where these services are going. And I think that's happening across the board in the state, where we need to know exactly where every penny is going. And let me say thank you to Brent Martin. Would you stand up, Brent? Because he is my go-to guy when I get these blanket statements of $49,99,000. He goes, that's a clue, Miss Ashley, that's a clue, Elena, that something's going on with this money. And so the more we dug into it, the more we had questions. Well, anyway, thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate you.
Okay, so we will just start. Are you okay with just taking questions? Okay.
I want to say something first.
Sure.
We don't name whistleblowers. In our office, we keep whistleblowers' names completely confidential. Even if somebody came to me now and said, I don't care, doesn't matter. It's their responsibility if they want to take credit, not ours.
Amen.
I honor that.
I appreciate that too. All right, do we have questions? What's that? I'll let you choose. Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, David.
You've looked at a lot of institutions over a long period of time in Oklahoma. Could you judge the level of financial irresponsibility that you found here compared to all of the others that you have discovered throughout your time in Oklahoma? And I've got another question.
I don't think that's fair. Comparing this to others would be comparing apples to oranges, because everyone has their own issues. I think these are very serious. I think it's serious enough to get on them immediately and get them corrected. But I will say that I released an audit last April that had some of the similar issues at the state level of vague contractual expenses where I couldn't really determine what was being paid for. So it is a problem that all of Oklahoma needs to work on.
The second question, is your office involved in training Board of Education people or superintendents in what the rules and regulations are for their duty?
The state auditor's office is periodically invited to come in and present for an hour to different associations across the state as they ask for certain topics. We don't have a lead role. I can't impose the office on any association. I do think that it should, I'm just going to say this, I think it should be mandatory that new school board members spend 2 hours with the auditor's office so that we can empower them to understand exactly what their responsibilities are and exactly what they will be held accountable for. But that does not exist at this time.
Yes, sir.
Do you have, can you give us a sum total of misappropriated expenditures? Maybe I missed it in your PowerPoint.
There is no sum total. I've been asked this by multiple people, so you're not alone. If you were paying attention yesterday, we were a little bit late for the press conference because we were trying to finalize the PowerPoint, but I will have something out on the website maybe tomorrow. It's probably not going to happen tomorrow, but by Monday that summarizes everything in such a manner you can see these things bullet pointed. I will tell you that I think the Tulsa World did a pretty good article of bullet pointing what the issues were, so you might look at that.
Oh, you have a question?
Yes. At one of the meetings that I went to a few years ago, Dr. Guest was saying, oh, well, there's no relation with a Guest over at, I guess, one of the banks, BOK. Was that right? Did you find any other findings under the name Guest? Wasn't there when Deborah, yes, worked at, yes. That worked at BOK, I believe it was.
I'm sure there are many relationships within Tulsa County. Our audit was an audit of expenditures from Tulsa Public Schools. That was our scope, and it was limited there. So the short answer is no. That would require something above and beyond what my office has the authority to perform.
If I understood your presentation earlier, you had about 35 million. If I look at the overall budget of about 600 million a year for TPS and times it by the 8-year window that you had, that's about 4.8 billion. Now, 35 million of 4.8 billion is 0.007 of a percent. That seems to me to suggest that there's an awful lot of money that wasn't being looked at, maybe in terms of hiring of teachers, teacher salaries, and a variety of other places that money might exist. And the implication being if there's a corruption in one side of the house, there's probably or maybe corruption in the other side of the house. Is there any attempt, going to be any attempt to look at a much broader array of the amounts of monies that have been budgeted over the last 8 years?
The short answer to that is we are done with this audit, and we are now turning it over to the Attorney General. I will be having discussions with him on areas that I think that should warrant an investigation by his office, but we will not be looking any further at these expenditures. Now, I'm impressed by your calculations there, but keep in mind as auditors when we go in, the first thing, we don't audit 100%. So what you saw here was a sample. This is not 100%. There are probably things that weren't caught. I can't speak to those. But one of the things as an auditor that we're going to do is immediately take out payroll, take out utility payments. We're going to go to risky areas and look there first. No audit will ever tell you 100% of anything.
Thank you very much for this report. I'm really tempted to set up a nonprofit and start sending invoices to TPS. So I have a question regarding the vendor contracts, and that is, I'm looking for a broad pattern, if you have seen one, of, and not commenting on obviously an audit doesn't comment on the moral value of why people would do this, but I'm simply asking, in looking at the emails and having conversations with people, is there any kind of a pattern of motive as to why so many people employed within TPS would create contracts and situations and help people set up nonprofits and share private data about students and all this in order to profit people who are not family members or where there's not a direct kickback? This seems unusual to me because I can't imagine myself doing that. But did you see any kind of prearranged networks or any kind of motive or reason for why there would be such a rampant risking by employees of their own jobs or their own moral integrity? Obviously, there's a huge covering where they didn't expect to be caught, but still, it seems unusual to me that so many people would financially benefit people who are outside their family. Does that make sense?
Those are good questions. Those are great questions. But my job is not to speculate. My job is just to present facts, and that's where I need to stay. So.
Great job, Auditor Byrd. We're lucky to have you.
I did not see you back there, Senator Mazie. It's good to see you as well.
Wouldn't miss a report by Auditor Cindy Byrd. The information that's being turned over to the Attorney General. Take, for example, the information about Deputy Hudgens. I can't remember his first name, but to us non-auditors, that sounds like an easy observation of a kickback scheme. I know it's not your role to make a legal determination, but my first question is is that information going to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigators or just the Attorney General's office?
Okay, so what you all need to know about the role of the auditor. Whenever I find something that I believe has violated law, I have to turn that over to the proper authorities who can do something with that. And in my role, that's either the Attorney General or the District Attorney of that county. So I don't have the authority to go ask the OSBI to start an investigation. So the first chain would be to send it to the AG, who's right next door to my office over there, and then let him make the determination of whether he wants to involve the State Bureau of Investigation.
And then looking at potential issues across the state, when you're in the state senate, you're told by the state school board association, don't worry, these school board members get, tremendous training and tremendous preparation, and we've got, good financial oversight of these 500 school districts. And not that you can weigh in on that per se, but how would the school board association communicate or teach the importance of regular forensic audits for our 500 school districts across the state? Would that need to be a statutory kind of requirement, or is that something that we can somehow force into the system?
Before I answer that question, can I just say something? I had been an auditor for 22 years. I didn't have to make any decisions without having all the documents right at my hand. I didn't have to make any conclusions in a report until I had spent time to investigate and look at it. One of the scariest things I did as a newly elected state auditor was to sit on the commissioner of the land office board and cast a public vote. My first thought was, wait, I don't have enough information here. This hasn't been audited. It's very, to any new board member, you've got to know what you're going into, and you've got to research and do your work. Now then, as to whether or not we can do something in statute to empower these school board members, yes, that can be done. I don't know that you want a forensic audit, but one of the things that should certainly be done, school board members need to know that they can ask their financial statement auditor that does their routine audit every year to randomly throw other procedures in there. And for instance, let me ask you this. How many of you know the difference between the audit your school district has every year and what we just did? I mean, a few of you might. Every year, your school board or your school district has to have a financial statement audit. Do you know what that means? It means that somebody at the school, or they have to hire somebody to prepare a set of financial statements. And the auditor that comes in looks to make sure the numbers on those financial statements are correct. Now, they do have to consider materially direct laws and test them. But I can assure you that those laws have nothing to do with what you're interested in this room today. So every year you are getting a routine financial statement audit to determine if the numbers are presented correctly on a financial statement. But everything I hear from the citizens are, did we follow these laws? Did we do that? And no one's looking for that. So to answer Senator Mazzei's question, what could the legislature do? You could come up with a set of 10 procedures, and every year it has to be rotated to make sure that a school district is complying with certain laws, and their independent auditor that's doing their routine audit that's familiar with the district can easily and efficiently, being cost aware, incorporate that into the audit and make a difference. But part of what really needs to be done immediately, and it's not just school boards, this is cities and towns as well. Board members need to understand they have the right to ask for information. They have the right to pause an agenda item and say, we can't vote on this, we don't have enough information. They have a right to table something until the entity can provide them something to make them comfortable about a vote. It's okay to be the person who speaks up and says, I don't think we should do this right now, but sometimes that's tough. Long answer to your question, Senator Mazie, but yes, lots to be done, and I would love to collaborate with you on that.
Hi, Cindy. I've got a couple questions. How come and I heard this on repeated times from the district, well, we get an audit done. Why are you worried? So tell me, question number one is, why didn't the outside auditors that they so rely on, why didn't they find anything?
Again, it's not my place to speculate. But I did just describe the financial statement audit. They're not looking at these things. They're not, and they're not required to look at those things. That's the scope of a financial statement audit. Now, maybe some of the supporting documentation, if they did a random sample and one of those purchase orders came up in their sample and there wasn't enough documentation, they could have looked further into that, but they probably would never have done this turn over every rock type of audit that's called a forensic audit.
So what you're saying is that we really can't totally rely on that audit.
You can rely on that audit for the purpose of that audit, and that's to tell you if the financial numbers are presented correctly. You can rely on it to determine the financial position of the district. Is it in a good place or not? But you can't rely on it to know if they're following bidding laws or if they're, and I would say this too, fraud is usually never found. I think it's like 3% of all audits done uncover fraud. It's a very low percentage. Forensic audits, we already know something has happened and we go in to find it.
Okay, my second question, and I think everybody in this room, well, not everybody, but a majority of these people in this room have little confidence in that board, except for Elena. Anybody disagree with me? I have very, very little confidence that we'll get correction out of that board. And that's my biggest concern out of this whole audit, Cindy, is that culture. Yes, Dr. Johnson says we're going to change this and we're going to change that and we may do this, but at the end of the day, we had a board member walk off their financial committee because he was refused documents. And those were documents that I even asked for, and Elena will tell you, I was asking for documents that I was refused. And I have real reservations that there's going to be the financial changes within the district that we need to with the bond guy going. I sit on the bond committee for the district, and they're getting ready to ask for a $600 million bond. Guys, I have my reservations. So the fiduciary responsibility of the board, that's my question. Don't they, where does that start and where does that end? And is that even in your wheelhouse?
I can't make people be responsible. And sadly, there is no crime in Oklahoma for gross mismanagement of your tax dollars. That's a real problem. Now then, Senator Mazie, I'm gonna call on you one more time because you've jarred some memories here. It's been a rough week. But I do have 3 ideas that would take legislative change. Okay. The first one is there is a statute on file currently that says if someone leaves employment with the school district and then later wants to be hired back as a consultant, there is a long laundry list of specific items and documentation you have to have. If that statute also covered any consulting agreements, we wouldn't have had this problem. So that's number 1. Number 2, competitive bidding. Now, this is a soapbox of the state auditor, and you can write this down, every one of you. Competitive bidding in Oklahoma is not operating the way you think it is and the way it should be to take care of taxpayer money. I've been on this for 3 years now at the state level. Everyone claims it's too hard. Well, I'm going to brag on the auditor's office because back in 2018, when we all took drastic cuts at the state level, we took quotes on our water service. We saved every penny we can, and it didn't hurt us to do that. It does not take much to make sure you're getting the best deal for the taxpayer money. Now, then the third thing that I would suggest. I have long bragged on county government being the most transparent level of government in Oklahoma. And I will go toe-to-toe with anyone on that. That is the only level of government that is publishing their minutes and their expenditures once a month for you, the taxpayer, to see where your money's being spent. I'm not advocating that school districts do that because it would cost money and it would hurt, but they all have websites. If you, the taxpayer, were able to go out here and look at a list of expenditures made by your school district every month, see the exact vendors and the dollar amounts, things would be a little better. So those are 3 things to get you started in the right direction. Anybody that wants to take that up?
I have a couple of questions. First question, what now? So you talked about the Attorney General, State Superintendent Walters, I guess. Like, is there, when such abuse has been discovered, is there kind of a timeline for, okay, we're going to be following up with it, like, for the next 5 years? Or how, is there a process in place for these kind of situations?
Again, I wish I could tell you that.
Okay.
All I can tell you is that the auditor's office is done.
Okay.
And when I say that, I mean, we've given a really good amount of information that needs to be looked at. I really have no more authority than just a report. And I've reported everything, and I know you all were patient, impatient, frustrated, but we've given you everything we have, and it's up to you to hold the other people accountable to do their part.
Okay.
And I'm just going to ask that you be as persistent with them as you were with me.
Okay, and the second question, is your office and other states' auditors looking into artificial intelligence to provide more transparency? I've heard that that's really great for transparency. I didn't know if that's something we're looking into.
I think that each agency in Oklahoma, and certainly the local school districts, because that's local control, have the choice to use whatever means they need to be accountable for transparency. I like to say that we trip all over ourselves trying to fulfill open records requests. And the next thing, the part that you all don't see, is whenever we release a report like this, then we have everybody that wants all of the work papers. So then we have to go through and make sure there are no social security numbers, birthdays, names. We have to redact stuff. And then that's very important to us to get that information to people. So I wish everyone fulfilled those things as quickly as we did. They don't. But again, there's nothing central that would hold each person to one way of being transparent.
I think everybody wanted to hear there was going to be a perp walk, and so that's what we want to hear, Cindy.
You know, they just don't give me that kind of authority.
I got you.
Okay, I'm hoping that you're encouraging the Attorney General to look into these nonprofit organizations and follow the rabbit hole to see if there are connections to TPS personnel or board members or anyone else, because I have a sinking feeling that there's a lot of that stuff going on, and since their invoices are so vague, we need to really dive into who they are and what they're doing.
I think you need the Attorney General's phone number and email address ready so that when people give you that question, you can say, that's who you need to call now.
Hey, you guys don't need my help. You got a hold of me real fast. Now, I do want to say one thing about that last comment, because what you just described isn't that what we're kind of seeing with USAID or USAID? We all need to be, I'm not going to talk about TPS here. I'm just going to talk in general for a moment. We all need to be concerned anytime taxpayer money is being shoveled off into NGOs, non-government organizations, which include nonprofits. We've got to know what we're doing, because you can't just take public money out of a bank account and put it somewhere else and call it non-public money. It's still taxpayer money unless it was used for a public purpose. So I'll leave that there.
The elephant in the living room, to me, is that there are unions involved in public schools. Were there any funds exchanged between what you have seen that went to or from the union?
There may have been annual dues that we didn't make a comment about because that would have been an appropriate expenditure of something. I'm not even going to get into that. We didn't notice anything that we felt like needed to be put in this audit report that would have concerned you.
Foundation fund. Huh? No money from the foundation went to the union.
We didn't audit we didn't audit the foundation. We only audited Tulsa Public Schools. Some of the items that I reported to you about were things that involved expenditures that overlapped, and we were able to look at those. You know, I do want to say something here. You have a great foundation here in Oklahoma, or in Tulsa, that's really beneficial to that school, and I don't want any of this to cast a bad light on that. Bad actors took advantage of a situation, but that doesn't make the Tulsa Foundation for Tulsa Public Schools, whatever the name is, doesn't make that a bad organization. And there's still a good organization trying to help Tulsa Public Schools.
All right, we got a couple more, Cindy.
So under your DEI presentation, you had mentioned that there needed to be further investigation. So that would obviously be with our Attorney General?
That is correct. We'll be turning over the work papers to the Attorney General, and that will be something that he's going to have to decide.
And so what do we do as we, the people, that has an Attorney General that's going to be running for governor? How do we handle that portion?
That's outside of my scope of work here. That's not for me to.
So I mentioned this, and I realize that. And a big thank you for what you exposed to all of us. And the reason why I brought that up is because we have people that are engaged here, and we need to not just let this go away. So anyway, thank you.
This is gonna be the final question. Does somebody else have another question?
This lady right over here.
Oh, okay, so that's fine. Go ahead.
Cindy, as an accounting graduate, did I just miss it, or is it only in the written report, not according to accounting practices that was so important in auditing?
You mean the type of report?
Yes.
Yes, because forensic audits are based on state statute. They have nothing to do with accounting principles or standards. So you're correct. Not according to accounting principles. I do want to point out something. You know the question nobody asked me?
What's that?
This audit report was called a special audit report.
Okay.
Not a forensic audit.
Why was it called special?
Okay. So the governor has a unique authority in a certain statute that gives him the right to call for a special audit. And so we're always careful whenever we get an audit request to go back to the statute, make sure it's the proper authority and exactly what they're allowed to ask. So with this type of audit, I was only allowed to use my administrative subpoena power that the office has. In a forensic audit that's requested under Title 74-18F, which is requested by a district attorney or the attorney general, where they assist us with full subpoena authority, full subpoena power and authority. So there's a difference in how far you can go.
So you could have gone farther had you been given a forensic audit.
We could have gone further if one of the appropriate authorities I just mentioned felt like it warranted a subpoena of full power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, and thank you for that information. It was very informative. My question is, because it is a special audit, is this information, will it be publicly available going forward, or is it something that's ongoing with the Attorney General that will be withheld until that's done?
This report is located on my website, so if you haven't been out to the website, it's www.sai.ok.gov. And we've created a special link. I think there's a little magnifying glass and it says news. You're going to see something that says Tulsa Public Schools. If you click on that, right now you will see the slideshow and you will see the audit report. Now, when I get that press release, I just promised by Monday on, that will be there. So all of this is open record. And as people ask for work papers or whatever they want to see, that's just something that we're transparent with and you're allowed to ask for.
So it'll also be available through Tulsa 912 Project on our YouTube page and Facebook page. So you're welcome to look at it there. At least this presentation will be. So if there's something that you missed, then you can go back and watch it. So just real quick, Okay, it's repeat your web address.
www.sai.ok.gov. The SAI stands for State Auditor and Inspector.
So from this point on, I think our job is to put pressure on the Attorney General's office to get them to look at what has been submitted and to possibly give us what we're looking for, which is people going to jail. So I have a phone number. For his office. It's 405, and we'll post this, 521-3921. And his Tulsa number is 918-581-2885. So I encourage you to encourage the Attorney General, and just as was mentioned, he's running for governor, so he wants to make you happy, right? So let's encourage him to make us happy and take a look at the information that Cindy has provided, and so that we can move forward and possibly put this to rest. And guys, now we also have to get behind TPS. Okay, we've got to encourage them to continue to do what they're supposed to do to move in the right direction. It's about our kids. And if our kids aren't, it really irritates me that there's millions of dollars missing and we have thousands of children that can't read. That's wrong on so many levels. And the way that you can control the masses is not teach them how to read. Because if you can learn how to read, you can teach yourself. So, these are the things that we need to do. We still need to show up at the school board meetings. We still need to demand accountability. And when our school board members ask questions, we need to stand behind them and encourage those questions to be answered. And people need to be held accountable. So I can't thank you guys. Yes, ma'am. Pam? Oh, I can ask and I'll find out. So her question was, can I ask if Deborah Gist has been asked to resign from TU yet? That's a completely different entity. That's a private college, and so they can pretty much do what they want, which they do. I'll check on it, though. I'll be happy to check on it. But the heat now, we put the heat on the auditor's office for 2.5 years. Now let's put some heat on the AG's office, and let's get them to start looking at this stuff, and let's start seeing some charges filed, and let's see some accountability at TPS, so that, you know what, so our kids can be proud of being a TPS student. That's what we want. We want people to be proud. We want these kids to be proud for being a TPS student and not feel like they have to be shamed. And I think that's what's been going on in the past. I want to say thank you so much for coming out and taking the time to hear what the auditor has to say, to be able to digest what she said. It was a lot of stuff. And like I said, the video will be available on at Tulsa 912 Project on our YouTube channel, and will be uploaded onto our Facebook page as well. So thank you. If you are a delegate to the convention, I will see you on Saturday. I got one more day being chairman, and then I will be unburdened by what has been. So y'all have a great evening.